articles already written about me. I don't know if anybody's read them, by a journalist named Mariah Blake that appeared in The Republic and Mother Jones. So some of this might be old, but there are still new information that wasn't covered in those articles. Hopefully you'll find that interesting as well. Because this is my first time, I'm a newbie at this, I thought it wise to kind of read, because I have a lot of ground to cover, and if I don't, I'll probably get into all your time, and she would not like that. No, I don't want that to happen. Take that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. This is kind of where I want to start. We'll see how it goes. I am the secret son, or love child, as depicted in a recent article of Reverend Moon, a billionaire founder of Unification Church and proclaimed the Messiah of all mankind. My mother, Soon W. Choi, was a scion of the powerful and billionaire Ched family. They were the former owners of Korea Life Insurance, the second largest life insurance company in Korea, known for its iconic 63-story gold headquarters in Seoul, still the largest gold-cladded structure in the world. I was born into a world of great wealth, fanaticism, and hypocrisy. My life reads like a Korean soap opera, filled with money, sex, power, and intrigue. I witnessed firsthand how power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I've seen how the road to hell is paved with good intentions, all by one warped by a fanatical sense of righteousness, where the ends always justify the means. And lastly, I understand
Don't worry.
Having a moment, guys. It's okay.
I understand the psychology of rejection and secrecy. I promised myself I would do this. The circumstances surrounding my birth condemned me for a large majority of my life to a life lived in the shadows. Okay, I hold a BA in history with a minor interest in philosophy and psychology from George Washington University. And I completed my MBA coursework in finance from the same university. For the past decade, I've been involved in litigation in one form or another, originating from a 1999 confidential agreement with my father and the Unification Church. Like my mother, I was once conditioned to believe that my father, Reverend Moon, was the Messiah of all mankind. But unlike my mother, who was brought into Unification Church by her mother, my grandmother, I was born into it. I did not undergo a, quote, conversion experience, nor did I have to renounce my family members or give up a former way of life. The church was my way of life, but I sensed that there was something different about me. That difference revealed itself when I discovered at the age of around 12, late 12, early 13s, that my biological parents were in fact Reverend Moon and Soon W. Choi. The people who I thought were my parents and siblings, Mo Hee Pak and his wife Hee Suk Yoon, and their children were ordered by Reverend Moon to raise me from birth and keep the identity of my real parents a secret. It was this coerced deception and many unfulfilled promises made by my father to my mother, which are at the heart of our litigation with the Unification Church movement. My mother's involvement with Reverend Moon started in 1953, when at the age of 17 years old, he forced himself upon her and took her virginity. At the time, my father said that because my mother was destined to be his eternal bride, or the quote true mother in UC parlance, he had to have sexual relations with her to reverse what the, and forgive me because I'm going to bring up UC Mooney terms. And some of you might know it if you follow the church, but a lot of you won't. But just indulge me there with me, because there are a lot of unificationists out there who may see this and it will probably help them. But again, my father said to my mother that after he basically raped her, that he had to have sexual relations with her to reverse what the archangel Lucifer did to the young Eve. Reverend Moon taught that the biblical Eve was seduced by the archangel Lucifer when she was 17 years old, which was the real reason for the fall of man as described in the Bible. That's how we think about the fall of man. One cannot understand the context of our involvement with my father in the Unification Church without first becoming aware of the central role my mother's family, the Chef family, played from the inception of his nation's spiritual movement. For both Mooney and non-Mooney alike, the implications of this, quote, hidden history of the Chef family are compelling and significant. When my father first met my grandmother in 1953, he knew from her name that she was going to be a very important person to him. Her name was Duksam Lee, and literally that translates into attaining the three, which is quite an odd name, even by Korean standards. But to any Mooney, her name was significant because it represents the central mandate of the divine principle, the unification belief system, which was the three blessings depicted in Genesis 1:23, which is to be fruitful, to multiply, to have dominion over creation. Owing to the Chef family affluence, my grandmother was the primary financial backer of the nascent Unification Church movement, donating several $1 million throughout the 50s and 60s. In fact, there probably wasn't a soul who wasn't helped by my grandmother in the early church days, which is the reason why she's such a beloved figure within the Unification Church. Counting in today's dollars, $1 million from the mid-1950s would equate to approximately $8.5 million today. In addition to selling her $1 million mansion in the early 50s and donating the proceeds to the church, she continually donated significant amounts over the decades leading up to her passing in 1973. Forgive my sniffling.
Do you want a tissue?
Somebody give me a tissue.
I have a tissue.
So I can stop this annoying sniffling.
Anybody got a tissue now?
Right.
Napkin.
You got one.
Here we go.
Thank you for bearing with me.
It's not an order.
That's right. Okay. Hopefully I'll be sniffle free now. Let's see if I can do it. Okay. Okay. My grandfather, Song Mo Che, was a substantial businessman in his era. He was a self-made millionaire by 26, back when $1 million was really something. And despite making and losing a fortune 3 times, by the early 1950s, when my grandmother joined the Unification Church, he had firmly laid the foundation for the Shinnola group, which was the Chef family-owned conglomerate. And he laid that foundation for it to grow into the multi-billion-dollar enterprise it became. As my grandfather's business expanded, his influence reached into the borders of power in Seoul, Korea. On many occasions, he was sent at the personal request of the president, at that time, Park Chung-hee, to lead trade negotiations with the U.S. and Washington. And during the Park Chung-hee years, he had a direct phone line to the Blue House, the hotline, as they called it. And he was head of the organization akin to the Council of Economic Advisors in the U.S. And he would closely advise the president on economic policy. My grandfather built an elite business group and became the second richest man in Korea, as judged by tax payments behind Byung-Chul Lee, the founder of the Samsung Group, who was a close personal friend of his. It's kind of ironic that when the wealthiest men in Korea met for lunch, they would mostly end up talking about their family and kids and not business. In some ways, this epitomized the type of man my grandfather was. Despite all his success and power, what really mattered to him the most was the well-being of his children and employees. At heart, he was a humble and noble man and was considered to be the most ethical businessman of his generation. And that is a fact my mother and I are most proud of.
Especially being Korean.
Especially being Korean, corruption was enormous. Basically still is today. Given the family standing, it's easy to see why my father was transfixed on gaining the support of the Ches. With my grandfather's support, the corridors of power and finance would have been wide open to this nascent movement. There's no telling how he might have, or how high he might have risen with the right backing. For my father, the Ches were the jewel in the crown for the fulfillment of his messianic vision. To non-Moonies, the following is nonsensical, so again, indulge me and bear with me. But my father told my mother repeatedly that God was trying to, quote, consummate all of human history through the Che family. He believed that my grandfather stood in the historical archangel position. My two uncles, my mother's younger brothers, stood in the historical Cain and Abel position. And my mother and her oldest sister, who both joined the church soon after my grandmother joined in 1953, they stood in the historical Leah and Rachel position. My father believed he had to model, again, indulge me further, because this is helpful to Moonies, and it might be boring to you, so please bear with me. My father believed he had to model the life of the biblical Jacob by marrying two blood sisters and have 12 sons with the sisters and their handmaidens. Like Jacob, my father planned to first marry. The sniffings are happening.
We have this tissue there.
Like Jacob, my father planned to first marry the oldest sister, my aunt, in 1960, and then 7 years later divorce her and then marry the younger, more favored sister, who was my mother. In the years leading up to 1960, most everyone in the church knew about my father's marital plans to marry both my aunt and my mother, and acknowledged my mother as the future, quote, true mother of the Unification Church. According to my father, if he was going to get his mission right, he needed to get these crucial relationships within the Che family right by modeling what the biblical Jacob did. Unfortunately, due to my father's overactive libido, which resulted in several unintended pregnancies with other women, my aunt's faith in my father eroded and culminated in her leaving the Unification Church soon after her official engagement to him in the late 1959. All this is stuff hardly anyone know. So this is like the hidden history, what they, for good reason, have tried to keep quiet, because it completely is...
Anathema to what
yeah, it's anathema, and it contradicts what they've been teaching the people from 1960. So, after my aunt broke off their engagement, my father went into a tailspin. A relationship they had cultivated over 7 years, which was central to his mission, simply evaporated. Rather than acknowledging his own responsibility, he blamed my aunt and the Ches for failing him, which is the typical Reverend Moon modus operandi of passing the buck and blaming everyone else except himself. However, he had a dilemma. He had to keep to the, quote, heavenly schedule and be married in the spring of 1960 when he was 40 years old. Moonies believed that the number 40 holds significant cosmic importance, so he needed to quickly find a bride in a short period of time, about 4 months. Talk about a rebound situation. That's basically what happened when he chose Hak Jahan, to be his wife. Since he felt rejected by the Ches due to what he believed was my aunt's betrayal, which he took as a personal affront to his authority and wishes, he ended up choosing Hak Jahan, the correct Mrs. Moon. The only criterion he gave to finding his new bride was that she be a nobody and a girl where parental approval was unnecessary. As a teenager, Hak Jahan was smart, hardworking, and pretty. But unfortunately for her, she had a mother who was both ignorant and unkind. In many ways, Hak Jahan was a victim of circumstance, since she was the illegitimate product of an affair between her single mother and a married man with whom she attended the same-sex cult prior to her joining the Unification Church, and where her mother ended up working in the kitchen as a maid. Since Hak Jahan's biological father didn't claim her as his daughter, parental approval was never an issue. Fast forward to 1964, and things are not going well for my father and his grandiose plans for world domination. 4 years after the Holy Wedding in 1960, the Messiah, my father, and his perfect bride, Hak Jahan, occurred, and the world barely took notice. One has to understand the general belief of the membership in 1960 in the Unification Church. Moonies at that time, they actually believed and thought that once my father was married to Hak Jahan, that the heavens would open up and the world would miraculously bow down and recognize him as the Messiah and his wife as the true mother of all mankind, which is actually symptomatic of magical thinking that tends to go on in cults. The reality, however, was a major letdown. Their eldest child, Yejin, who was initially proclaimed to be a heavenly prince, ended up being a girl. Heejin, the third child, died soon after her birth. And the membership growth was stagnant, and the church still struggled financially. This was in stark contrast to my grandfather, whose wealth and influence continued to expand and prosper during that period. My father concluded he had made a mistake by marrying Hak Jahan, and he needed to course correct and go back to the original plan with the Chez, or what he called or termed the Chez family provenance. My mother's decision to go to the U.S. in the spring of 1964 to pursue her graduate studies at Georgetown University prompted my father to act on his plan. Essentially, my mother wanted to get away from my father in Seoul, Korea, and give Mrs. Moon some breathing room. Understand that ever since Hak Jahan married my father in 1960, Hak Jahan and her mother were very uncomfortable because everyone in the church knew that Hak Jahan was occupying a position never intended for her. This is the reason why Hak Jahan's mother encouraged her to have as many sons as possible with my father, because she knew that with each additional son, her daughter's control of fear that if she left for America, he might lose her, and with that, the potential access to the Chez family wealth. Also, losing my mother would present him with an existential crisis, since the only thing protecting him and the church from my grandfather's retribution was my mother's loyalty and devotion to him in the church. And most importantly, by marrying my mother and conceiving children through her, he would be successful in modeling Jacob's life, or Jacob's course as the movies call it. And that was probably the most important mandate for him according to the divine principle. It's morphed since then. The divine principle today is quite different from what it was in the earlier days. They had to kind of adjust it and tweak it to kind of fit the facts that happened after he married the current Mrs. Moon. On the heels of my mother's arrival to the U.S., my father soon followed her to the U.S. My mother came in 1964, my father came in 1965, soon after. And he basically, quote, he said he was risking everything to make me. His sole purpose was to come and impregnate my mother, because he didn't want to lose her. It was only after he got confirmation of her pregnancy that he left her side. He stayed for about 3 months in 1965. I was born the following year in 1966, and the rest, as they say, is history. The truth of the matter was, by the time I was born, Mrs. Moon told my grandmother that she was prepared to step aside and vacate her position as his wife and true mother in favor of my mother, since my father made his intentions very clear that he was going back to the Chad family province because he made me. And yet it was my mother's compassion that prevented him from following through with his plan to remove Hak Jahan and assume and allow my mother to assume her rightful position as the true mother of UC Parnance. My mother wanted to believe in Hak Jahan's potential, and as a woman, she didn't have the heart to displace Hak Jahan and her 4 young children. And the reason is because she had to give me up after I was born. So she understood that. In hindsight, my mother knew that what she knows, that if she knew then what she knows now, she would have taken a far different approach. After I was born, my father wanted to have more children with my mother, but she refused because she couldn't bear the heartbreak of having additional children taken from her and raised by another family in order to keep things a secret from my grandfather. What I've just explained is part of the real hidden history of Unification Church. It's taken a long time for me to reach this podium in order to set the historical record straight. But I'm relieved this day has finally come, since I am no longer burdened with the secret. Given the implications for the Unification Church and the legitimacy of Mrs. Moon as the true mother of the Unification Church and her offspring as the true children or legitimate heirs according to the principle, it's easy to see why the Unification Church movement has wanted to keep this information under wraps and why they have gone to extreme legal lengths to try and maintain secrecy. To argue that my mother is the rightful true mother of the Unification Church is not difficult, since Mrs. Moon herself had already done so when she was prepared to vacate her position to my mother in 1966 and 1967 timeframe. But with the passage of time, concluding a sympathetic world of great wealth, privilege, and absolute power, it's easy to see how Hak Jahan lost touch with the conscientiousness of her youth. Add to this the sad reality of her own upbringing by her mother, and it's easy to see how Hak Jahan never developed the proper skills to raise her own children, who most would be for today. To argue the merits of my claim as the rightful heir to the Unification Church movement is pretty simple when you look at the context and timing of my birth. If Hak Jahan was the destined true mother of the Unification Church movement, why did my father step outside of that sacred and holy marriage and create me? And why did he tell my mother at the time that he was risking everything to do so? Well, in my book, that kind of makes me a pretty important conduit. In the UC sense, of course. And it's one of the reasons why some of my half-siblings either hate or are indifferent towards me. This is fine by me since, due to the Moon's family abuse cycles and their tendency towards narcissistic personality disorder, which is transferred from parent to child, and their delusional absolute thinking, i.e. believing that they're special and therefore mistreat others more people. This type of thinking behavior is something that I do not share with my wife. Now please don't get me wrong here. I'm not campaigning to be the next Messiah or something of that ilk. Because frankly, I'm not interested, nor am I afflicted with the need to feel special or superior at the expense of others.
Well, that's just what he's saying.
Really?
He's more special than you all.
You are cuter.
Oh, well, that's debatable.
Okay, here we go.
Sorry.
I am hopefully aware of my limitations, and I'm wise enough not to presume that anybody needs me to get closer to God. Believing or claiming to have this, quote, special or true insight into what God wants is a very slippery slope toward complete ego identification. My mother and I have had a unique life that most find hard to comprehend. To us, it's the only life we've ever known, so there's no point in comparison. But from the outside looking in, I can now appreciate its novelty. Nevertheless, our path to recovery has been long and hard fought. And like,
You have extra time to solve.
yeah, and like many in this room, we could not have made it without the support of loved ones and that universal presence of grace and love that is truly beyond understanding. Though we might sound or appear normal, we certainly bear the scars that are permanently etched to our being. A favorite quote of mine is from Khalil Gibran, who said that the deeper that sorrow carves, into your being, the more joy you can contain. So I think we're fortunate because though we've been through a lot, we're able to kind of contain a lot. And so that's been the blessing of this Holy Spirit. And also coming to, it's just amazing. It's really commendable to have what you're doing here. I mean, there's a lot of SGAs here, there's a lot of scholars from academia, and just lay people, but it's just a very powerful and encouraging sign to me that, going forward, there's hope and there's a way for people to recover and to kind of heal from their experiences. So thank you. And I guess thank you all for doing it. I think I got one more page.
He's trying to keep up with his dad and just go on and on.
8 or 10 hours.
Yeah, just give up your
day.
day.
That is torture, yes. Okay. So, my mother, she endured, sexual exploitation from my father at the age of 17. She was arrested and interrogated by authorities because of the same thing, my father. She forsake the $1 billion inheritance in support of the same man, my father. She conceived a son in secret and then was forced to give him away for the sake of this same man, my father. And like many other Moonies, we both live on the verge of foreclosure and bankruptcy because over the last 5 years we've been in litigation to enforce payment owed to us by my father in the Unification Church. I, for my part, have for many years sought recognition from a man who I now realize was not emotionally available due to his narcissism. Having a son of my own, I can now recognize how tragic my father's life choices have been, as I could never conceive of abandoning my son. Let alone living a life without him. My father is truly a sad and tragic human. And the bottom line with him is this. One cannot claim to be the Messiah or true father of all mankind and not be a father to his own son. It's really the ultimate hypocrisy. Right. As I mentioned before, the last 5 years, my mother and I have been embroiled in litigation for what is owed to us by my father in the Unification Church movement. Mind you, $20 million, the value of our legal claim, is a lot of money.
by anyone's standards. But like those who sued the UC in Japan in order to claw back or even reclaim funds that were coerced through spiritual racketeering, we believe in principle that we are doing the same with regards to the millions of dollars my grandmother and the Ches have donated to the church for over 2 decades, starting from 1953, which again in today's dollars is well north of $20 million. So actually, the Unification Church is getting quite a significant discount. The bottom line, again, is this. My grandmother and my mother did not sign on for what the Unification Church moved to. They did not sign on for the cult of personality or the spiritual and financial enslavement of its members, many of whom, especially in Japan, were made destitute. And they didn't sign on for the creation of a Korean-centric ruling elite who have enforced and maintained the sycophantic cocoon the Moons live in. If the UC ever hopes to become a viable and legitimate organization, it needs to get back to the unification part of its namesake. There's no reason other than greed and corruption why the Moon family should hoard billions in offshore accounts, while the vast majority of its membership is filled with them. As the saying goes, charity begins at home, and it's time for the Unification Church movement to live up to its founding mandate of creating a one-world family, and not merely giving lip service to it. Our hope for coming forward today is really to inspire others to have the courage to take back their power and stop participating in the lie that unfortunately became the Unification Church movement. And thank you very much for indulging me for being patient. One more point I wanted to make. I finished. Give the floor to Donna, because people are probably wondering, why did it take so long for me to come forward? Why didn't I come forward and support the concept of Donna? And simply, the reason was I realized I was naive now, but at the time I was hoping for some type of reconciliation with my father. I mean, despite the church stuff, ultimately he was my biological dad. And as a son, I really wanted to believe in his goodness. I wanted to believe that he cared. And he really gave a damn. And that was the toughest thing to let go of, eventually, especially with the litigation and everything. When you go through something like that, when basically they spend more on legal fees than the value of our suit, it really tells you something about the nature of these people. To treat blood like this, especially the sacrifices my mother had made, really shifted me in a significant way. But it was delayed because I didn't experience that until some time later. And that's when my pivot occurred. So that's kind of the reason why it's taken so long for me to get here today. But at least I got here today. And that's the most important.